Good afternoon. We are Reno High's Unit 2. My name is Andrew Brooksbank.
My name is Heather Foster.
My name is Katie Douglas.
My name is Tane Erickson. Our unit coach is Lieutenant Colonel Scott Marriott, and our teacher is Mr. Richard Clark.
Excellent. Good afternoon. So again, this is Unit 2, and we have chosen question 2. What were the major conflicts at the Philadelphia Convention, and how were they resolved? With arguments, can you name for and against giving each state the right to send the same number of members to the Senate? With arguments, can you name for and against, including the three-fifths clause and the fugitive slave clause in the Constitution? You may begin.
By May of 1787, the inefficiencies of the national government under the Articles of Confederation were evident, and delegates were called to the Philadelphia Convention to ameliorate these defects. This congregation was, as expressed in Federalist Farmer II, a fair and equal representation in which the interests, feelings, opinions, and views of the people are collected in such a manner as they would be were all the people assembled. Having delegates representing 12 of the 13 states meant that major conflicts arose between differing interests on the centralization of power and representation in the national government.
After deciding to scrap the Articles of Confederation in favor of a federal system, delegates debated over how their states would receive representation in the national legislature. Delegates from populous states predominantly favored the Virginia Plan, drafted by James Madison, which created a bicameral legislature with proportional representation based on population, and that the members of the second branch of the national legislature ought to be elected by those of the first.
Less populated states, however, wanted equal representation in the federal legislature, as was the case under the Articles of Confederation, and therefore favored William Patterson's New Jersey Plan, which called for a one vote per state in a unicameral legislature. Luther Martin, a Maryland delegate, expressed concerns relating the unequal representation under the proportionality of the Virginia Plan to slavery for the smaller states.
Ultimately, reformers reached a compromise, integrating some ideas from both propositions into the Connecticut Plan and consequently the Constitution. Under Article 1, Section 2, delegates to the House of Representatives were elected proportionally, but under Article 1, Section 3, 2 representatives from each state were appointed of the legislative chamber, the Senate.
By giving the Senate an equal number of representatives, the Great Compromise was not only a compromise between small and large states, but one between delegates believing the source of power for the national government was the states, and those believing it was the people. It also required senators to represent their state's needs as a whole, regardless of the size of their states, and increase the likelihood of popular factions utilizing governmental power for their own ends, as discussed in Federalist 18. Today, although California has a population of almost 70 times that of Wyoming, the two states have the same number of Senate seats, which can be seen as an underrepresentation for the people of California.
Northern and southern states also disagreed over whether slaves should be counted for the purposes of representation. The Fugitive Slave Clause in Article 1, Section 2 addressed this by adding 3/5 of the slave population to that of the free population. Southern states still viewed this as an insufficient protection of their peculiar institution, and thus Article 4, Section 2, the Fugitive Slave Clause, was included in the Constitution to ensure all escaped slaves be returned to their owners. Additionally, Article 5 prevented future amendments that would block the importation or migration of slaves, which served as a concession to southern states.
The three-fifths clause was also an appeal to southern states, increasing the likelihood of ratification. The nature of the compromise is best delineated in Federalist 15-4. The federal Constitution views slaves in the mixed character of persons and of property. This is, in fact, their true character. However, many Northerners, like Elbridge Gerry, retorted, why should the blacks, who were property in the South, be in the rule of representation more than the cattle and horses in the North? Article 1, Section 9, and Article 5 of the Constitution didn't even allow this issue to be dealt with on a federal level until 1808.
The shortfalls of the 3/5 clause of the Fugitive Slave Act manifested themselves with the Missouri Compromise of 1820, the Kansas and Nebraska Act of 1850, and the proposed Colvin Amendment of 1861, all of which attempted to deal with the repercussions of slavery that the convention had failed to conclusively deal with, and which would require 600,000 American lives to resolve. Thank you.
All right, well, we can start with some follow-up questions. So our first question is going to sort of put a contemporary spin on what we're discussing. So is compromise as important in settling major conflicts today
struck when we talk about the Three-Fifths Compromise 230 years almost later, how obscene the topic is, at least to my eyes. What do you suppose 230 years in the future they will see as an obscene topic that either was or wasn't the topic of compromise?
I would argue that when 230 years later, and we're seeing compromise we've seen today, is the public reaction to the 2015 court case over Felony Hodges. Now, prior to this Supreme Court case, over 30 states had legalized gay marriage per state. However, once it was passed, there was a large pushback, though a minority of popular opinion, a continuum popular opinion, pushback against the rights of all individuals to marry regardless of gender. I think as we continually to progress forward and make more progress in social acceptance, it will be shocking that there was any pushback against the Supreme Court case.
In addition, looking back in 220 years, they might add some problem with the 19th Amendment and seeing how long it took for women to get the right to vote. And as we can see, we have progressed socially much more liberally. So in 220 years, that might seem as
They may also look back on the system of gerrymandering and see that as a gross misrepresentation of the populace, and in essence a new way of creating a legislative body that does what the legislators want, not what the people want. And that could be seen in the same light as the Three-Fifths Clause now.
They might also see the 14th Amendment in the same way that they saw the Three-Fifths Compromise, as the 14th Amendment finally brought the Bill of Rights to each individual state, and they could see this as why did it take so long for this to happen? The Bill of Rights wasn't actually being enforced up until then with the inclusion doctrine using the due process clause of the 14th Amendment.
We're not out of time. All right, I'll proceed. Now we're
I'm going to offer some constructive comments and feedback for you. I just want to applaud you on your team cohesion. You coalesced very well together. There was sort of a seamless transition amongst each of you, not just with your prepared statements, but with the question and answer period. So I definitely want to applaud you on that. And with that, just the comment, should you move on, is you just want to make sure that your fellow teammate has completed their thought before you jump in. But that's really just a refining point. That's not a major criticism, but that's just in case you move more things that were just into your mind.
Yeah, I think that your testimony was well written and well presented. Just one part of it that I appreciated was sort of the ramifications of unsolved issues, taking it further, right up to the Civil War. I thought that was, it wasn't just the didn't end with the convention, that, it was the next some odd years and all those deaths, and look what happened. So that I appreciated that part of your testimony. I appreciated your participation as well and how you all brought different things to the table. I especially liked, is compromise less essential or more essential today? How you kind of were disagreeing with each other a little bit, and girls, you were saying something, and then you brought in the Madison quote and used it well, and I always appreciate a quote used well. I thought it was funny how you brought up gerrymandering. I thought that was great. I thought to myself, well, it might take us 230 more years to understand it. And we'd be like, well, that's ridiculous. So, that was a really great thing to add there that you don't usually hear. I thought you guys did a great job this morning. It was a fabulous job, guys.
Thank you.
I agree with everything my fellow judges have said. I think it's a historical question, so I was really impressed by the depth and sophistication of the evidence that you were able to mobilize and support. We heard, for example, not only references to, but quotes from at least 3 of the Federalist Papers and appropriate quotes. Luther Martin came up, who is, at the convention, probably the most important person in this debate, and yet we almost never hear that person's name. So I was really impressed to hear him mentioned, because the Anti-Federalists, often the ideas are celebrated, but we don't know these people. I really appreciated that. Just one tiny nitpick, I was a little confused about some statements in the written presentation about the Fugitive Slave Clause. I think somebody in an answer referred to it as the Fugitive Slave Act, and it seemed to be conflated with the 3/5 compromise. Maybe I just heard that incorrectly. I would just check that.
I heard that too, that there was something weird going on there. I
Yeah,
don't know if it was read wrong or it was just,
Yeah, I would just check on that. And I think since the question is about major conflicts and slavery is a major conflict, the bullet point doesn't ask for it, but I think we have to have the ban on interference with the international slave trade until 1808. I mean, that's just kind of one of the fundamental slavery compromises. I think we should probably mention all three of those. But that's just nitpicking. And what I thought was excellent presentation and answers. I thought were some of the best I've ever seen.
I left you with high praise this morning, and as I walked out of the room, I was a little worried that I had either jinxed you or that people were going to accuse me in some way of favoritism, which would be nonsensical because I've never met you folks. That was out of the park, really seriously out of the park. There are certainly some areas that you can improve, and I would look for those assiduously. I suspect you'll move on. I don't know that, and I don't mean to presage that, but if you do, you're going to want to work assiduously on the points they made. But look, I tried to think of the hardest, weirdest question I could ask you, and there wasn't a pause, candidly, in the response, and the response was spot on to the question and application to the Constitution with the high level cognition by the principles involved. There's just, we can't ask any more of you than that. So really, really, really good work.
Great.